If I were to take a glass and pour civility into a glass, they're really good at telling me when I do something wrong back there. It's just like at home. Couple of you caught that. Wouldn't you want that? Wouldn't you want a world where we could just pour that and drink that? Some civility in our public sphere. If I could just kind of open a bottle and just pour in a drink of treat everybody with respect. Oh, that'd be great. Take a drink of that. If I could bake a loaf of bread that was made out of mercy and compassion and then slice it up really easy so that everyone could get a piece and everyone could taste what mercy tastes like, would you want to take a piece of that? Of course you would. Of course you would. We spend so much of our appetite on the junk food of outrage and exhaustion and anxiety, which is not exactly our fault because the shelves around us, that's what's just filled up around us. But it is our responsibility to choose better. And so sometimes we do better. We sit at the tables of politeness and middle groundism, which, I don't know that helps either. It's not really the best food. That's kind of like the McDonald's of food. It sort of looks like food, but it's not going to do you well if all you do. If you're not going to have the hard conversations to get to real peace. So if I could make a restaurant that served, instead of that, if it served real peace and organic hope and farm-to-table grace, and if the menu said free on every item, would you stop blowing your cash and blowing your energy on all the addictive shame and impatience and the impossible standards that you hold yourself up to? That's the point. Let's go one slide forward there. That's the point of Isaiah 55, is that there's better food out there than what we get stuck with so often in our rhythms. God has provided a healthy meal, suited for your personal well-being that can transform the whole world. And it's a meal cooked especially for those of us who feel the most stuck, especially for those of us who have the least access to the good stuff. That's the point of Isaiah 55 in the first section that Paula read. So let's go to the next section. Yeah, so the poet changes metaphors from food to thoughts. I have ways of thinking. Some of them are really helpful. Some of them get me in a lot of trouble. Y'all have ways of being. Everyone here has ways of being that some of them are really suited toward making your life a little easier, and some of them are so self-defeating. We all have ideas. Just great ideas. If we could just poll everyone and find out all the great ideas for how the world should go, I believe in us that we could come up with some good dreams. I think we could get some great strategies. If we said, if Nancy who's out with the kids, could snap her fingers and change the gun laws, boy, she'd do that pretty quick. If Pat could snap her fingers and deal with all the hunger in Salt Lake, boy, that'd be a great thing to do. Lots of us, if you could sign your signature, sort of, like a spiritual executive order and just fix things in the world, wouldn't you just put your name on a piece of paper for that? Is that easy? Now, some of you have crazy ideas, I know well enough, but I trust that together we not only have good intentions, but together we have a lot of great solutions for how to make the world a better place. However, your ideas compared to God's ideas, which one are you going to lean on? Yeah, it's like we just, together, for all the great solutions we might have, it doesn't meet the standard of the one who gives us the power to have great solutions in the first place. It's really, I don't know if it's fair to say it's God's ideas, but let's go to the next slide. But compared, whatever power there is in the world that gives life, whatever it is that holds all things together, whatever it is that inspires love and causes rain, and whatever it is that inspires us to be able to dream for better, that little spark in us that dreams for better, that thing, the ground of being, that thing that animates love, you can call it God, you can call it Word. In here it calls it Word. You've heard recently, and the Word was good, and the Word was God. You can call it Spirit. Some of you might like it to be spiritual but not religious. Fine. You can call it Buddha. We heard that word earlier today. Natural social evolution, whatever you want to call it. Whatever that power is that builds that spark in us, I think most of us can agree that it's deeper and more trustworthy than any idea that any one of us can come up with alone. That's the point of Isaiah 55. Is there something better out there? So to review, Do you want a better world? Do you want a better heart? Okay, you've got ideas for that. You've got good ideas for that. God wants that even more than you do. And so what we're calling God has these great ideas that's not even really ideas, but more so they are these ways of being that are weaved into the very fabric of life and existence. It's just there's a hope for what we can be. Beauty and wonder and care and belonging are these fundamental principles for what we are capable of being. Therefore, next slide. Therefore, because of that, no matter what you're going through right now, no matter what executive order is breaking your heart, spiritual or otherwise, no matter what fear shakes you awake at 4 a.m., which has been going on for, 6 days for me. No matter what genuine, real threat, this is not just ideas, no matter what real threat is facing you and your body and your soul and the people you care about, and many of us are far too literally in the crosshairs, alongside all of that, there is also a truth weaved into existence itself that yearns to draw you somewhere else and somewhere better. There is a spirit of grace in all places, in all circumstances, that aches for you to find joy and peace rather than grief and despair. And when I say spirit, I don't mean some frou-frou invisible ghost. It's not some cartoonish beard in the sky. It's the spirit that makes mountains sing. When you're in the mountains and you just feel more whole, that's spirit. When you're down and just numb and empty and you see that tree that wakes you up, it's that spirit. That spirit keeps showing up whenever we see the roses and the thorns. And that kind of spirit, somehow sacred and holy and real and everlasting and loving, and it can follow you everywhere. That's the point of Isaiah 55. That's the point for us, it's the point for them. The people for whom this was written so long ago, about 2,600 years ago, they had suffered some pretty serious thorns in their life. Because one day, about 2,600 years ago, there's just thousands of comfortable families. There were people with decent jobs. Their kids are going to school, doing what kids do in school, getting in trouble, doing the things. They'd go to their synagogues. They'd go to their favorite restaurants. They had their friends. They built their lives. They saved for retirement. They just lived. These normal people. And one day, they just got ripped from their towns and from their cities and from everything that they could imagine as normal. Their whole world just turned upside down. It's not like they didn't see it coming, but even though they knew something was coming, when it finally happened, they were just gobsmacked. They could not believe that what is happening could be like what they were scared of happening. I mean, they might not have trusted their old leaders, but in the Bible tells a story about a half a dozen times over and over, so it's just sort of something that happens in the world. The Bible talks about such dopes that so many of the Hebrew leaders were, but at some point, this new tyrant comes in and just destroys their country and creates all these new rules that seemed only suited toward cruelty for some people, or building up his ego, or building up someone's coffers. And the new leader promoted just these ideas about God that twisted anything they had ever thought of. And they thought, how could our neighbors go along with that? How could God possibly let that happen? That regular question shows up over and over in the Bible whenever this same story happens. So one day these people were, they were too comfortable maybe, let's say. One day just living their lives, feeding on politeness and religiosity and freedom and charity for those who deserved it. And then one day they had all these good ideas how to do better, even if those ideas were really far from the best. But the universe just fell apart. And the country they knew disappeared right before their very eyes. All of a sudden, they were captives to an abusive power. Their jobs were no longer certain. Schools, what's the point? Eggs just kept getting more expensive. That part's not in the Bible, but you have to assume the economy was broken. The silver linings were few as they got torn from their homeland and brought to another country. Same story keeps showing up in the Bible, but in this case, these captives, they were stuck for 70 years. 70 years. So the people who first got torn apart, exiled, and stripped of any plan of wholeness, for 70 years, they had kids. And they would tell their kids, it could have been different, but we're going to make the best of it. And those kids grew up, and they told their grandkids, they said, there once was a place that was so holy. We dream of it a bit, but we just have to adapt and survive, keep our heads down. And those grandkids, as they started to grow up, and a new king, when those grandkids grow up, a new king shows up. His name is Cyrus. And he says, y'all want to go home and start again? You want to try this again? This new king says, I kind of believe in you. I think you've got a spark in you. Cyrus didn't believe in the same God they believed in, but Cyrus, after 70 years, said, I think there's something in you that could remake a new culture. There's no such thing as a free lunch, so I'll be holding some taxes on this. But he says, I'm going to send you back so you can start over. What an offer. And some said, no, this is fine. I'm going to take over my dad's farm, and I'm just going to deal with the new reality however I can. Some of them had kids in junior high, and you never want to move when your kids are in junior high school, so they just stayed there. Some of them felt like, well, we're not threatened, so we'll just stay here and do what we can. But others thought, yeah, something better is out there. Others thought, I feel that thing bubbling up in me. There's this spirit that bubbles up and tells me there's something better even than we can imagine. So some of them head back to the promised land with eyes wide open to what God was doing. And some of them watch the Spirit continue to weave love through just the vision of mountains and hills and trees. And some of them set to restoring the temple. And they got into plenty of silly arguments because they're people, but mostly they set to restore a way of life that honored the deepest values that they could remember or that they could grasp for. Someone named Isaiah wrote a poem about it. It's up there. And he says, friends, whatever you've gone through, that loss, that abandonment, that despair, the feeling of I just can't listen to the news anymore, the feeling of what is going to happen and where is God and all this, he wrote this poem to say, it's not the end. This is the beginning of restoration. God is in the business of restoration. God is in the business of love. No matter how many businessmen infest the ground with their thorns and briars of insipid vengeance and greed, God is in the business of hope, especially for the hopeless. That's the point of Isaiah 55. And for those of us who want to pause and limp toward that and imagine and dream and even just try to get to the place where we can hope for that, this is a community where we can build each other up toward restoration. Amen.